record. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name is Alian, and I'm one of the two owners of Transit Bookstore, which is the small bookstore behind me. So we're an independent bookstore in Jakarta, Indonesia, and it's a great honor to have again Anton and Bora to come to Transit virtually now. For now, hopefully someday we'll meet in person both. And yeah, hopefully you both can basically basically come to our store and see what Transit is really like and what books we actually carry. Because I actually just finished Curse Bunny, reading the author note, the afterword, just before I left for the bookstore, and I think I will put Curse Bunny in the War and Peace theme just solely because Bora's afterword. So if you haven't read it, I think you should read it. And
wait, do you mean Curse Bunny or do you mean Toward Eternity?
oh, sorry. I mean your Utopia. I mean your Utopia. Your Utopia.
Toward Eternity is my book.
Your Utopia in the War and Peace theme, because I was kind of confused whether to put your Utopia in the War and Peace theme or not. But then I read it, and then basically I read it, and especially because of what Bora wrote in the afterword, I think it really deserves a place in the War and Peace theme. So yeah. Okay. So I'm here with Bora and Anton, and the writer, the author, and the translator for this book, Your Utopia. I have the UK version, and then we're having another event with Honford Star, the publisher of this version of the book. So I think before we get into the book, I just want to ask Anton and Bora, where have you been? What have you been doing since for the past two years since we last did this? I know Anton has been very busy with all the books that you actually publish, including the BTS book that we also carried. And then people are like, what? Transit is carrying BTS books. So, so yeah. Can you please give us an update? What have you been doing since the publishing of Curse Bunny? And then now it's Your Utopia. Bora, you want to go first?
For the record, it's Anton and Bora. His name starts first, so he goes first.
Okay, I mean, her last name is Chung and mine is Hur, so even in Korean, her name goes first alphabetically by the Korean alphabet, so this is BS. But so as you all know, I feel like did we launch Cursed Bunny at Transit? You guys were like one of the first kind of like events that we ever did. And I remember it was like we also helped launch Norman Erickson Pasaribu and Tiffany
Happy stories
Zavos.
mostly.
Yeah,
Happy
Happy Stories
mostly.
mostly.
Yeah.
And it was really funny because all four of us ended up Booker Prize nominees that year. So that happened since January 2022. And then it's been like a never-ending cavalcade of work. Bora and I were nominated again for the same book, Cursed Bunny, for the National Book Awards. So we went to New York City. That was November last year. So, Yeah, a lot of things have been happening. Bora's published like 1 million books since then. It's like all of her backlog kind of just like came back. Like every book that she has ever published and every short story she's ever published. And like publishers keep in Korea, publishers like keep asking Bora for more work. And unlike in the Anglosphere, it's very natural for an author to publish more than one book, in a year. And Bora's published like 4 or 5 at she's published a lot. I'm surprised that she has any backlog left, but apparently we're still getting new work from Bora. So yay, that's great. I've done the BTS book. I've published Counterweight by Duna since then. And um, I went to see my father by Kyung-suk Shin. And God, there are so many books have been published and translated, and there's so many to come. Like we have a lot of announcements ahead of us. Just Bora and I just announced what is book 4 in our teamwork. So book 1 is Cursed Bunny, book 2 is Your Utopia. Book 3 is Red Sword. This will be published in the UK, but we don't have a US publisher yet. Book 4, we have a US and UK publisher. It's called The Midnight Timetable. I don't know when that's coming out. Like, I don't think we've decided. I think that's coming out like late 2025, I want to say. I think that's like the time that it makes the most sense. So yeah, there's so much work that is ahead of us,
Yeah.
and we're very, very excited to deliver it for all of you guys.
I guess my
Oh, and I'm
question.
also publishing my book. I
Yeah,
have to
true. You
my
have to plug
novel,
it in.
Toward Eternity by Anton Hur from Harper Via. It will be published in the UK as well, and I'm pretty sure it will be available for distribution, at least in Indonesia. So we are very, very much please buy my novel. I would very much like to sell out. Thank you. Sell through. I would also like to sell out, but I would also like to sell through. Thank you.
Well, my very important question would be, which party is better or was better, Booker or National Book Award?
I don't know. I feel like the food was kind of similar, although the dessert at the National Book Award was better. Like the venue for the National Book Award was incredible. It was like out of a movie about it was like a oh, who's that American author who did Age of Innocence? Edith Wharton. It was like a ballroom out of Edith Wharton. It was very fancy on Wall Street. But they were both very, very fun, exciting events. Although I feel like the Booker was just more intimate, and we got to have more interaction with the other writers. Although like the nice thing about the National Book Award was that we did that stand for Palestine at the end. And that was really the best part, because all the finalists got to get together on stage to read a statement in support of Palestine and the ceasefire. So yeah.
And Bora?
So in 2022, after the Booker Gala, I got COVID um, from the Booker party, and after the National Book Awards party, I did not. So National Book Awards was definitely better for me because I was not sick. The Booker venue had better bathroom situation for the ladies. The National Book Awards venue they had like 1,000 people and just one bathroom with 5 stalls in the women's room. So the ladies were like raiding the men's bathroom. And I think Anton actually advised me to go to the men's bathroom. Yeah, but definitely not getting sick was a lot better. And in 2022, I was stranded. My husband and I were both stranded in the UK. We lived for a week in a hotel near Heathrow Airport because we needed a PCR negative result to be able to board a plane. That was the Korean policy. So we Yeah, so our own country refused us because we didn't get the Booker and we got sick. Well, because we got sick. So that was very grim. I'm hoping to turn that into a story someday, but so far it's been too traumatizing. But yeah, after the National Book Awards, we could safely board the plane. So yeah, in so many ways. Yeah, last year was better than the 2 years ago. But I've been to other places too. Curse Bunny has been translated into about 17 languages. And 4 or 5 more are coming this year and next year. All thanks to Anton and Honford Star. And yeah, it's been exciting. And now I'm translating a lot of Polish novels. And Mistbound by the Malaysian author Daryl Ko. I'm finishing it up, and it will be published in Korean this year, I think, by the end of this year. Yep, that's about it.
So Anton, everyone has been saying, like in the Anglosphere, everyone has been saying, "Wow, Anton published so many books per year," but then actually in Korea, it's just a normal thing to do. I find it very interesting. Yeah, and yeah, for those of you who haven't bought it, Anton's books are still at Transit. We still have one copy left each. So yeah. Yeah, I think so. Would you say Curse Bunny? Okay, so we actually give chance for readers to ask questions, right? And then one of the, I think the most often asked question is, why short stories? Why was Bora's first 2 books are short stories? And I'm not sure whether this question was answered when we were talking about Curse Bunny, but and I'm actually wondering because Anton mentioned Bora has a lot of backlogs, but do they were they published consequentially in Korea, and then was this okay? No, it's not. And then so what made you both decided okay, let's try to publish this one first and then this one is the second? Can you tell us a bit of a behind the scenes stories about how why, especially why short stories?
I can answer the why short stories part, but I can't really answer why those 2 books and those 2 sets of stories. That will have to go to Anton, or more likely Honford Star. I have no idea. First of all, I'm really bad at writing novels, I guess. Um, my attention span is very short, so I can concentrate on writing short stories, but when I'm writing a longer story, I kind of forget what I was saying in the front by the time I go to the middle, so I'm not very good at it. Um, and I think it has to do with the culture in Korea. In Korea, when you judge an author or the author's kinds of caliber, you go to the short stories. So in Korea, at least when I was growing up, short stories had the same weight as longer novels. And we were in school, we were forced to read a lot of short stories. And also what Anton calls the author licensing program. In Korea, there's this literary contest. Any newspaper or literary journal that is worth its salt has this contest called the Newspring contest. So if it's, let's say, I'm just making this up, if let's say there's a newspaper called Jakarta Daily, then they have Jakarta Daily Newspring literary contest. If it's Indonesian Gazette, then Indonesian Gazette Newspring literary contest. So that why Newspring? Because they announced the winner around this time. So end of February to maybe mid-March, and they start accepting most commonly short stories, poetry, criticism, stage play. Those 4 categories are the most common, and they start accepting around November, December, and the winner is announced around February or March the next year. And if you win an award from one of these literary contest, the Newspring contest, you are officially a writer. And if you try to apply for a grant from the Ministry of Culture or the Arts and Cultures Council in Korea, you had to, it's a little different these days, but in the past, before 2015 or so, you had to write which year you passed the literary contest. So it's like a licensing system, and I never went through that system. So I don't have a year that I was authorized to write short stories, but every year, so around this time of the year, all the big major publishers are busy gathering the winner stories, and they publish it into a book. So that book, the collection of winning short stories that come out at the early part of the year, that's like a snapshot of what's hot and new and what's current and relevant in Korean literature. And all the students are forced to read that at school. And I used to love it. I used to love those collections when I was a child, and I used to buy it every spring. And when I look back at them, they're just amazing, amazing authors who were just beginning. Shin Kyung-suk was one of them. I bought the collection of Newspring Awards when I was in high school, I think, when she was just beginning as a writer, and I loved her story. And it was so different from all the other serious realism because it was more lyrical than all the other drier narrative stories. But anyways, so that's what short story means in Korean literature. And I never thought short story was any less or not important compared to novels. And my favorite, my other favorite, Anton Chekhov, the Russian playwright, he said, more words do not make a better story. And Anton Chekhov never wrote a novel in his life. The longest he wrote was a novella. So yeah, one can write good stories and not make it long. Not that I'm as good as Anton Chekhov because I don't write plays, but anyways, so yeah, that's my apology for short stories. Why did they publish my work? I have no idea. Why would they do that?
Yeah, I'll reserve that question to Honford Star because for next week, because yeah, it's very I don't know why it's such a question. And also it's so it for Transit, it is interesting that Cursed Bunny is still actually our all-time bestseller book since it was published in 2022, and it's a short story, right? And then if we try to push other short story titles, people are so defensive about it, or like they were like, I don't read short stories. And so it's the whole perception about short stories. It's very interesting. But Indra and I are lovers of short stories. I really truly believe that to judge a writer, how good an author is, ask them to write a short story, because with that short basically space, you have to tell actually a story. And yeah, So yeah. So to have really successful 2 short stories collection as your first books is something that is to be celebrated, basically. And another thing that I personally noticed from Your Utopia is I like the way how each stories is placed, like the first story and the second story, and I like the pacing of the stories, and I think it's so brilliant that the first story is the first story. The Center for Immortality Research is the first story because it just grabs people attention, and it's hilarious. I was reading it at the store, and I was laughing, and yeah, and if people ask what I was reading, it's like they won't believe me that it's actually a hilarious story, I think. Yeah. So Anton, did you have anything to do about how the placing of how the stories goes, which story goes first, second, third?
Oh yeah. I do tend to follow what the Korean editors like decide. But I only kind of like look at it a little bit and then I make my own decisions at the end. And that's what I did for Cursed Bunny. And some people were so like, oh, how dare the translator change the order of the stories in the book? And I'm like, oh, F you. Like, I seriously do not care what you think or feel. I only care about what I think or feel when I'm translating a book. I don't add Bora questions about what does this story mean? How is the reader supposed to feel when they read the story? I honestly don't care what my authors think or feel. I don't want to I don't want to ruin their work, obviously. And I do want them to think that I'm doing a good job. But I also want them, and every author, certainly Bora, realizes that once you've written and published the work, it's out of your hands. And if you really want like an effective translation, then you just have to let go and like not care about not care so much about like where it's going. So as long as you're not like, being misogynist, racist, or homophobic, or, in your translation, I think translators should have a bit of leeway in how we translate things. And story order is one of the things that's also a thing. For Your Utopia, they start off with the same story. I think it makes sense because you want to kind of, it's not quite chronological in terms of like near future and far future, but I really like the way that that we started off this story with this story, because either you had to switch the order around so that you go from future to the past, or you go from past to the future, maybe, if that makes sense. And because like the first story stands out so much that if it sort of appeared in the middle, I thought, oh, it would throw you off too much. So I understood why the Korean editor put the first story at first, and I think the problem, not the problem, but like the issue for me was To Meet Her, which is the title story of the Korean edition. And for me, this is the story that has such heavy emotional weight to it that I felt like if we use this all up in the beginning of the book, it's the third story, I believe, in the Korean. But if we use it all up in the beginning of the book, then it's just going to like the rest of the book is going to feel like after like the aftershocks. So I thought this story should go last. And I also especially wanted to translate Bora's afterword. I normally don't translate authors' forewords and afterwords because I think this is more of a Korean convention that we don't really do in the Anglosphere. Like, your work should stand up for itself. But I loved Bora's afterword, and I thought it really it was it was like a story in itself, and it really contextualized the stories, yes, but it just, I don't know, it gave me so much hope, and it gave me so much, it has such an emotional resonance with what Bora says about mourning and the need to emotionally process all of the terrible things that were happening. And bear in mind, this book came together during the pandemic. So, you know, the entire world was going through a traumatic time, and this was, you know, Bora telling us that we need to process all of the terrible things that are happening and all the deaths that are happening. We can't just, you know, be business as usual. And so I thought the world needed to hear that. And I think the story that best illustrates that is To Meet Her, where Bora herself is processing this truly tragic real life death of a transgender soldier who was illegally dismissed basically for being transgender. And so for me, it was very important that that came last. And then in the beginning, it's kind of fun to open with like the two fun stories. One, which is like the funniest story, which is Center for Immortality, and the second story, which is zombies. And I think zombies are very camp and funny. So I was like, yeah, let's do the zombie story second. And then we kind of like go into the more serious stuff. And like, oh God, I love the stories in the second half so much because they have so much emotional weight and resonance. Like Seed, which is an early Bora Chung story. It's one of her earlier stories, I believe. And but it's, you know, it has so much resonance. And my personal favorite story, which is Song for Sleep, which is the story where I was like, wow, I can't believe an elevator made me cry. And after I translated it and it got published, like I see so many Instagram posts and reviews saying, I can't believe an elevator made me cry. And I'm like, I'm so happy because it feels like I did my job. So yeah, that's the reason why we map the stories in the way that they are.
But then I also saw your tweet, Anton, that you said, I don't understand why people read short stories from beginning to end. Like you yourself as a reader, you kind of pick and choose the order of the story in a short story collection when you read it by yourself. So so you actually position yourself differently as a reader and as a translator, basically.
Yeah, I read very differently as a translator and as a reader. Like, I don't know how to explain it. I know that most people, when they read a short story collection, they will read it beginning to end. Also, in the Anglos, like in Korea, and Korean readers are a bit different from English readers. Like Korean readers don't really read a book, like a short story collection from beginning to end. I noticed that Korean readers kind of like open wherever to the book. Whereas in the Anglosphere, people A do not generally read short stories, and B, the ones who do read short stories, like they still have like that novel mentality where you have to be taken in by the first line of the first page, otherwise you're not going to move on to the rest of the book. And this is a huge problem when it comes to Korean literature because Korean writers, not Borat, but most Korean writers tend to like, you know, have a very vague and moody beginning where you don't know where the setting is, you don't know who the characters are, you don't know what's going on. It's so much posing and like pose, mood, vibe, weather. It's like all of that for about 5 pages. And no Anglosphere reader has the patience for that unless like that writer is like extremely good at what they do. And even if they're extremely good at what they do, it's just so foreign to an Anglospheric reader. So yeah, so I kind of like have to recognize those realities and I have to like position things that the way that they are in English. But yeah, but when I read like even like short story collections like in because in English I sometimes I like skip and I go to the middle or whatever because sometimes like but I think it is still in general like important to have things in a certain order because I think there is an intentionality in the way that you order a short story collection. You can't just like you know mix whatever with no intention. I think it's very like important that you have that intentionality. It's like, you know, doing a mixtape. I think maybe some of the people in the audience remember mixtapes, but when we
Yes, the
tapes,
Gen Z probably don't.
yes. Like it was very important to like have one song follow another, you know, it's yeah, so that's like my thinking behind the ordering.
That is very interesting. Yeah, as you've heard, there's so much effort basically was putting. So did I get this straight? So Bora, there is actually To Meet Her book, short story collection in Korea. Is it the same, all of the same stories, and the Korean version is in Your Utopia? Okay, got it. Okay, that's great. Okay, so yeah, Anton mentioned in their intentionality, and we talk about the order, but I kind of want to know, like, for example, the first two stories, is it really that funny in Korean? Because it's actually very funny. Because, for example, like I put sticky notes, and so for example, right, like when we did the Curse Bunny event, um I think I accidentally put the Korean time wrong in the poster, and then I think Anton corrected, and then when I read the Center for Immortality, and I was like, what? This is like crazy. I had kind of like PTSD, because I have to make a lot of posters, right, for transit events, and then we had to go back and forth to make sure events posters are correct, like done correctly, which I think for me it's one thing that's very relatable. And yeah, it's was it, Bora, were you very intentional about being very funny? uh did you actually plan it, or did it come to you as you write it? What happened?
Um, so the entire thing actually happened, I mean, up until the point where that weird guy comes in. So that guy didn't happen, but up until then, it's all true. And that happened the year I started teaching. In the year I started teaching at the university I graduated from. So and it was the 20th anniversary of the department, and we were like this. Uh, the professor who was self nominated to be the director of the 20th anniversary committee wanted to publish a book about our department. But if it's a department, then 20 years is not that long. And they didn't keep a good record. And I had to start like I had to like start from scratch and gather all the information, like go around different departments in school and try to like squeeze out any piece of information that I could. And then that logo thing and the typo thing, oh my goodness, the typo thing really happened because I just hated the whole process. I was just so enraged that I didn't want to go through that stupid half-page invitation. And at that point, I literally had to like move around the logo for a million times, and I didn't have any strength left to find typos in the invitation. And in Korea, why it's Center for Immortality Research is because in Korea we say half jokingly but half seriously, you can change your nationality, but you cannot change your school affiliation. So which school you graduated from follows you around for life, especially which college or which university you graduated from. That kind of decides your life. I'm just sick and tired of it. Like that, the fact that I graduated from this damn university will follow me around for the rest of my life, and now I'm suing that university for my severance check, and, and it just sick and tired of it. So yeah, that's why and that professor stealing another professor's book, that precious, very expensive book, that actually happened, and the professor told me to cover. I like, cover what? And like, and oh yeah, that's supposed to be a spoiler? No, that actually happened. It's not a spoiler. It's just one weird thing after another. Oh my goodness, all these crazy people. And they're still professors at the university. They should all die. I curse them with all my might. I curse them. Yeah, I shall stop here.
We are only joking. We do not want anyone to die. We love everybody.
Anton, you're Bora's angry translator. But yeah, I agree. Sometimes it happened. That happened to here, of course. And yeah, like Indra and I are being followed by questions like, "Oh, did you do literary courses when you were at universities? Because you made this bookstore." And then when we said no, and then people would ask us, "Where did you go to university?" And then when we told them that we actually did engineering, they were like, "Wow." Yeah, so yeah. So yeah. So yeah, I can definitely relate. But yeah. Yeah, but then Anton, I actually want to commend you on the translation, right? For example, invitation and inviting words, and then also in Your Utopia, there's kada, and then it's actually cadaver. I like when I was reading it, it was like I was actually trying to guess what is kada because you use K, right, instead of the C, and then when the actual word comes out, it's actually with a C, and then I was like, oh my god, that's so smart. How did you do that? Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's like because of the way that it's in. I think I just follow Bora's lead because she doesn't use the Korean word for cadaver. She like the robot says the word English word or tries to say the English word like kada. And I think it is in English. It's such a long time ago that I don't remember. But maybe even like maybe Bora spelled it with a K like in the and used like the English alphabet like in the Korean story maybe. And so and maybe I saw it and I was like, oh, this is neat. I'll just like use this instead. Because I would have asked the same if that were the case, then I would have asked the same question. I could just look it up right now. Uh, 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 yeah. Anyway, 그녀를 만나다. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So let's find out really quick if that's yes. So Bora does use the English 0.kada.0.kada. So she does spell it Kada. So I must have asked in myself, not Bora, but I must have asked myself, why would Bora do it like this? And it's kind of like to prevent a spoiler like that. Because it is it is very chilling when you realize like, oh, we're giving all these spoilers. Like it is very chilling when you realize like why the robot in the back seat was saying, kada, like kept zero, kada, like why it was saying that. So yeah, that's it's one of those like I know what Bora's talking about moments. So I just like no. Yeah.
You both are practically married in terms of this author translator relationship, basically. Yeah. And yeah, like, but when I was reading the Center for Immortality Research, um there are a few Korean terms that you didn't translate to, and I think it's less than in other stories, but I think the most Korean terms or phrases I think is in that you didn't translate is in the Center for Immortality Research. Why did you do that, Anton?
I think most of the words that I didn't translate were honorifics like onni. And I feel like whenever I see the word like onni, like it's so specific. And I know that, other Asian cultures like have similar words like sister. Even like, African Americans, they call each other like, oh, sister, like, and they're not related. So it's just something that's spread across cultures, and I know that people will understand as long as they understand that, oh, this is someone who is like a woman who is older than me, 언니. With 차장, 부장, and all of that, like I didn't want to change them all into like middle manager, like division manager, blah blah blah,
You
because I
didn't
thought,
want to use the asterisks and then give explanation what
Those
those are.
oh
really
no.
meaningless. At least on these two people are fairly close to call
Uh,
themselves sisters in a work setting. So it's pretty. I guess it doesn't really need that much explanation. But 사장, 부장, all those job titles, those are completely meaningless, and those people are meaningless, and I hate them, and I should stop. Sorry.
So like because they don't really mean anything, like the specific meanings of those ranks don't really mean anything for the story. All the reader needs to know is that, oh, these are just, managerial ranks within a corporation. Like that's all they need to know. So I didn't like feel like translating them was really necessary. And I thought that it kind of like adds a nice flavor to the translation. And yeah, people do complain about it when I do it. Like, there was I remember when I did Love in the Big City, I did a lot of that for Love in the Big City by Sang-young Park. And there was like an Instagram post by, of course, a white reader who was like, I don't really read a lot of translated literature. And I felt like there were a lot of things that just were not left like translated. And I'm like, oh my God, that book is so translated. Like the narrator of that book sounds so American to me that I'm kind of like embarrassed almost at how translated it is, but like, oh, but here's this guy who thinks that, I'm writing in Korean. So, okay. Yeah, so I think that's basically my philosophy behind it. Like, I don't have a rule, but I do have a feeling where, oh, I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna translate this word because, it just sounds nicer if I leave it this way, or like, the reader has enough information. They don't have to know everything all the time. And not everything needs to be translated. Not, so that's just my philosophy. Regarding footnotes, I think footnotes are kind of okay for nonfiction, but for fiction, they really interrupt the flow of reading. And in Korea, like we use footnotes all the time in fiction, but I'm told over and over again by editors in America and the UK that I'm not allowed to use footnotes. So I can't do anything about that.
I don't like footnotes either. I really think it interrupts the flow of reading. And some Indonesian books really love, or some Indonesian publishers really love footnotes, and I don't really like it. Interesting, yeah. Okay. Another question for Bora is, one thing that I really like about Your Utopia is how are the narrators in each story is so ordinary. Like it can be like not you, but like me and other people, like the common people, because Anton and Bora is like award-winning author translator, but like when I read the stories, like I feel like it's so ordinary. Like it can happen, like the thing that happened to them can happen to anyone, basically. Did you always want to write this kind of character? Like, don't you want to write a superhero, or like, because their problems in this book is really like can be anyone's problems. It's very humbling. And and also, again, the way Anton translates it, it's very because sometimes in the translation part, I feel like there's a sense of kind of like teaching, like they want to teach you a culture or a part of the story, or but yeah, I don't know if I articulate this well, but then basically I'm very happy to find like really just ordinary beings in this book, and not like some overachiever. So the people who or beings that want to save the world or something like that. You know, like the one in Your Utopia, right? Like the robot actually wants to save someone, but then only one person, right? Like all the robot things was how to survive every day, basically. um, do you always want to write about this kind of people, or yeah, tell me about this process of writing ordinary people, basically.
I just told you at the beginning of this entire book talk that I spent an entire night moving the logo up 3 millimeters, down 3 millimeters, right 3 millimeters, left 5 millimeters. Yeah, so that was my life back then. I don't think it's that much different now. I at least I don't have to move logos. So yeah. And I do have zombie apocalypse, and this narrator who is fighting a zombie apocalypse, so that's fun. I always feel like I will never see the greater picture or never understand the greater scheme of things. I'm just one single little cog in the entire machine, and that's how I write my stories. I never imagine myself understanding the whole thing. And sometimes my readers say the stories are vague and they don't understand and they're frustrated. But that's how I feel. We as ordinary people will never be able to see the entire picture. That's how the world works, and sometimes that's beautiful, sometimes it's annoying, and sometimes it's downright tragic. That's what life is.
Did you do a lot of research about this? Because you wrote from military life to win energy to, like, there's so many things that you covered in each of the story, and each story covered different topics, basically. Did you do a lot of research about each topic?
I try to do enough research to make a story flow, but I know nothing about military life, and anything about scientific topics I just made up. And the tree people and seeds, I wrote the seed after I saw a whole lot of documentaries about um, how some companies monopolize natural resources. So that's based on some research, but not like book research, serious book research. It's based on some documentaries I saw.
Open I just open a page, and then it's from A Song for Sleep, and then it's what is Parkinson's disease, and then you mention Parkinson's disease is blah 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 blah, you know. And then when as I was reading it, like I just commend you for this, but I didn't know that you didn't do a lot of research. But yeah, it's for a book that you didn't, or a story that you didn't do a lot of research, it's really good. So
Oh, thank you. My mother's mother had Parkinson's, so I
okay.
had some idea, and our
Mm.
whole family did a lot of research
Mm.
because she was sick.
Yeah, so there are different sets of research you did based on different stories. Okay. Still very fascinating. Anton, did you do a lot of research when you were translating it? Did you want to write Parkinson's disease is a disease accompanied by tremors, muscle rigidity? Did you do a lot of research about each story?
Well, that kind of thing we have to is actually very easy research, and we just do it. There are things in, for example, Maria Grata Plena, where she's reading from this study that's about a satellite that's like, well, not a satellite, but it's like a space module that is exploratory module that's like sending back images of the planets. And these were from an actual scientific study that's been published. And so like we have to do things like, is it legal for us to publish it? Or a big thing was the lyric, like the song that's used in Song for Sleep is actually different from the one that's used in the Korean, because while I was translating the story, discovered that the song is still under copyright, so we can't use the same lyrics. Like we can't print them without permission. And also it's quite a hefty payment. It's like $300 a line or something. So we're like, okay. And so Honford Star were like, can you ask Bora, like maybe she could use a different song? Oh, it wasn't Honford Star. It was actually Algonquin did the main edit for Your Utopia, and so is Maddie. And so Maddie was like, like, are we married to this song, or can we like change? And I was like, actually, I think it was my idea. I was like, oh, why don't I just ask Bora if she, because she's very cool, like, she'll understand if we try to look for another song that's out of copyright. And so I explained the situation to Bora, and Bora immediately went and found this Polish song that's out of copyright, and then she translated it into English. So the lyrics translation, like the lyrics of that song that you see in Song for Sleep, is actually Bora's translation. And I suggested that, oh, we should credit Bora as the translator, but I think Bora was like, oh no, please don't do that. And so I was like, well, okay, but for the record, Bora is the translator of those lyrics. I did some editing on them, but it's Bora's translation. And I thought, wow, I don't know where Bora came up with the song, but it actually fit the story much better than the original song that we used. That song had other qualities, like it was a very simple song, and because it was so simple, it kind of like had a very heartfelt quality. But the song that we ended up using is a bit more melodramatic, but I liked it. And the metaphors like worked better with the story overall. So there are a lot of things like that that come up, little like researchy things like that come up when you're translating a story like this. Just to add to the previous question about why Bora translates smaller, like these small ordinary characters, I think part of it has to do with something that Bae Myung-hun, who is a Korean science fiction author, said. And he said, it's really countries like the United Kingdom or America or Russia where they have these space empires that are about like these grandiose heroes and superheroes, because they are empires and so they've experienced it. But countries like Korea, we've never really been in them. We've never really been a superpower, so we don't have those issues, and so that those are not the kinds of issues that we think about. Like we don't think about saving the world. And so Korean science fiction tends to be more like less macroeconomics and more like in the microsphere and in individuals. And that's why Korean science fiction kind of has its own flavor that's very different from American science fiction and British science fiction. That's why Korean science fiction works more on a personal level, on personal emotions, and it's more about really community, not, empire or space exploration or space conquering. And I think, yeah, so that's like my favorite explanation as to why Korean science fiction is the way that it is, and perhaps why Bora writes what she writes.
Oh, that's a very interesting thing and very eye-opening, I think. It makes me really want to read more science fictions. And also, just for the record, basically after I read Your Utopia, I remember an English class actually I was in when I was in junior high, and then it tells us to imagine what the world in the future would be. And I didn't have, and I still think I don't have that much imagination of what the future can be or can become. Like, I don't have your zombie apocalyptic imagination, Bora. Um, but yeah, I remember that my story for this English class was very boring. It was like a smart home or something like that. So like when I was reading this, oh, this can happen to us. Like for example, I really like the end of the voyage, and the disease actually started in Iowa, and actually actually in fact like the rest of the world. And then I was like, I never thought of that. Yeah. So I really like Your Utopia, basically. It's basically me fangirling about Your Utopia in this session. Yeah. We're coming into an hour of the talk. Um, I just want to ask you to tell us, I think, about your next project and the one that's just been announced, the novel. Can you tell us a bit more about those two books? What it's about and why people should pre-order and stuff like that?
All right. Red Sword started as Red Sword is a novel. It's not a collection of short stories. Although I did insert some bits and pieces of ghost stories and stuff. And it started out as a project to write about the first contact between 17th century Korea and Russia. We had two battles and Korea won, very surprisingly. And the entire story about the contact, the battles, and what happened next is very dramatic. So I wanted to use that. But then, I'm not very good at writing historical novels, and I ended up writing a martial arts novel with a lot of sword fight. And that was fun, like sword fight in a planet. So how do I make up a reason not to use guns in this planet? So let's make it very foggy and misty and you can't see anything, those kind of things. Yeah, it was really fun to make up those things as I went along. So I'm not really sure about the entire quality of it, but I had a lot of fun. And the Midnight Timetable is a collection. It's a cycle of 6 stories, and it happens in a research center where they research cursed objects, or it's more like haunted objects, not cursed, but haunted. And the narrator works there as a night watch person. The gender of the narrator is not very clear, I hope. And oh, she says Anni at some point, so I think it's a she. But anyways, she has a coworker who is blind, and her blindness helps her because she doesn't see the ghosts. So this person, like, she doesn't scare easily, and she can move around in the dark more ease. So she has a lot of experience with the haunted objects, and she tells parts of the story, and the narrator tells parts of the story. And I love writing ghost stories, and it was so much fun writing those ghost stories. There's no science, just all ghost fiction, and I love ghosts. Yay.
Anton, how was translating 4 books from Bora? Is there any book that you feel like it's harder to translate, easier to translate? How was those experience? Are those 2 books done, finalized for the translation, by the way?
One is, so Red Sword is basically done. And Midnight, I like a big chunk of it is done. Like, I mean, it's like about 20% of it is done. So I know like how the rest is going to basically go. So translating Bora now is just really easy for me. I kind of know what Bora should sound like. There are two large styles that Bora uses. I mean, she has a very sorry, she has a very variegated approach, but largely there's one kind of very humorous style that she has, and the other one is this kind of more calmer, less frenetic storytelling style that she has. And I felt like whenever I go back to translating Bora, it's like, oh yeah, I remember this, and uh, things are very, very easy. And Red Sword is really was different in the sense that there was a lot of physical description, physicality, because there's a lot of fighting. And despite Bora's best efforts, there are a lot of guns in Red Sword. There's one guy who is a very sharp shooter, for instance. And also there's this mysterious gun that keeps like reappearing. And I won't spoil the reason for it, but it's very cool when you realize what's happening. Because at first you're like, is this gun real? Like, is this a dream? Is this guy like a dream? And then it's explained why this guy comes back from the dead, and you're like, oh, okay. So it's really cool. Um, so Red Sword, I think, is going to be like a fun read. It's not that long. I think in English it came out to be like like under 50,000 words. So it's like a nice afternoon read. It took kind of long to translate because again, there are a lot of physical descriptions, and I was like, is he, and I had to like make some things up because I'm like, oh, he's hanging on the back of the robot, but there's a handhold, but there isn't on the shoulders. Like I had to like draw things in my mind. And sometimes like people would appear out of nowhere and they're supposed to have been there for. So I would go back in the scene and I'd be like, there was this person standing over here. So don't be surprised when he appears again. Like there's some of that because there's so much like physical description. It has a very cool mood. It's like, how do I don't know if you guys know V, the TV show. You know how those aliens were in like this white spaceship and they had these red uniforms, and it looked very modern and moderno. Like it has kind of like that feel. It's very allegorical. Like they're very like bold colors. Everything's very kind of have simple lines. It's it's almost like a medieval novel. And lo and behold, it is about the 17th century, as Boris says. It's like the 17th century medieval novel, like set in space. So I think that's going to be really exciting. Midnight Timetable is going to be really, really good. I mean, it like the first story, the opening story is the one that I did for, to get sample grants and so on. It just scared the bejesus out of me. And so it features like tunnels, tunnels, in traffic, like, you're going down a highway and you go into a tunnel. And after reading that story, whenever like, I'm driving with my husband like down a tunnel, I'm like, oh, am I going to get out of this tunnel? And it's so scary. And it's traumatized me like, the head in Cursed Bunny traumatized people from using their bathrooms. So that's going to be really fun to inflict on the general population. And you can really tell that Bora had fun writing it, and that's always like, it's so fun to translate, and I just can't wait until you guys like get to read both books.
Oh, I just remember one question because in the event that we did 2 years ago, Bora said you actually enact the things that you wrote, right? For Curse Bunny. Did you enact the things because the things that you wrote here too in your Utopia?
Uh, yes, some of them I did, and some of them I didn't have to I
Did you
didn't have to
experience it?
enact because I was actually at the protests and stuff. All the vomiting part in To Meet Her, I didn't have to reenact. Um, yeah, that's all I remember about that story, like the narrator vomiting. Um, Yeah, I generally do try to reenact.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think um that's all my questions about your utopia. But then I sent you both an email last night about the theme War and Peace, and then whether you have a recommendation. And I actually have a specific question for Bora because you read in Russian, right? So we take War and Peace from Dostoevsky because now we're just being lazy, and then and then we're like, okay, our theme names, theme titles will just be taken. Oh, Tolstoy. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so our team name will just be taken from a title of a book because a book title is already thought of for a long time, and it's very meaningful. So we took War and Peace to represent our collection right now. And then specific question for Bora: do you think people should read War and Peace, and why?
Uh, huh. Piece is like 5,000 pages in Russian, like tiny, tiny font. Um, so I don't know. Just because I went through that torture, it doesn't mean everybody has to. But there's one very famous scene, and I heard from my professors that a war scene, the battle scene, is used in American military schools to teach what shell shock or PTSD from battle feels like. And I think that is worth reading because Tolstoy tends to be really didactic. So yeah, so I don't recommend like reading the whole thing and going to the conclusion that you have to be good, you have to be patriotic. No, but that one scene tells you, it teaches you that war is meaningless. Like be the valor, courage, patriotism, all the propaganda used to promote war, that's just meaningless. Once you're there, once bombs are coming towards you, once you face death, then it's just all meaningless. And the character dies like just the character is the main character. He's one of the main characters in the 5,000 page saga, and he just dies. And Tolstoy doesn't make it heroic or beautiful or anything. He's in incredible pain. He's shocked, so he lost his judgment. He's kind of he's delusional because not delusional, but he's totally bewildered, and he just dies. And that's Tolstoy being real because he's seen war, he's been in war. So I think everybody should read that, and everybody should get an idea about what war and battle really means. It's just meaningless killing, and it's a lot of pain and shock and fear and just sheer terror of death, and that's it. There's no glory in it.
Yeah, and then you mind sharing with the others too, the two books that you send on the email, um so everyone would know, and then I'll write down, and then people will know. So you send
Let me
you yeah, the
name because
title,
it's
yeah.
not always easy.
And why do you think these two books will fit in the War and Peace theme?
Uh, Well, Anton gave us the first one. Eden and the Invincible are both about explorers from Earth going on a spaceship and like arriving at a different planet. Eden is the name of the planet. In that story, Eden is opposed to like Eden. It looks like a paradise from Earth, and everybody wants to go there because it looks like the perfect place that Earth people can immigrate to and build a new Earth. So the explorers go with that purpose to colonize the planet and build a new Earth. But they find out that the new planet is actually not new, and it's actually inhabited by the indigenous people, indigenous intelligent beings. And they slowly find out a lot of tragedy going on there, and they realize that Eden is not Eden and nothing is as it seems. I'm not going to spoil it, but the story, the Eden is, you can see it was first published in 1958, and that was 5 years after Stalin died. And Stanisław Lem survived World War II. He's Jewish, and he lived through communist Poland, the first years of communist Poland, under the satellite rules of Stalinism. So he knows what he's talking about when he describes dictatorship. And that's what he wanted to say. And the Invincible is classic Stanisław Lem. It's so against colonialism. It's so against the imperialist space exploration. The Invincible is the name of the spaceship, and it tells you everything. It sounds like the Spanish conquistadors invading Latin America, and that's what they wanted to do. But the entire planet kind of resists colonialism. So yeah, the Invincible is not invincible. That's all I can say. And it reminded me of how the land, the nature, and the indigenous life there resist being colonized, enslaved, and they all fight back. And I mean, when I first read it, it felt like a tragedy, but the second time I kind of went back to the end, it started to feel like maybe they shouldn't have gone there. Like, nobody should try to colonize another planet or another country or another people's land.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bora and Anton. Thank you so much. Do you have any other last words to say to the people that listen to this or will watch this in the future, other than buy Your Utopia for now and Curse Bunny and yeah, that.
Yes, please buy Toward Eternity, my novel. Thank you so much. Coming in July this year, 2024.
Anton, my birthday is in July.
Oh,
So
cool.
your
Happy
book will
birthday.
your book will be a Cancer.
Yes.
I think.
A cancer book.
Yeah, a
It's
Cancer book.
it's actually about cancer too, so
Oh.
that's fun. It's about a cure for cancer that goes awry. But yeah.
We're actually
Happy
looking forward.
Women's History Month, happy International Women's Day, and screw colonialism.
Oh, and also Ramadan Mubarak, of course.
Happy Ramadan. Happy Ramadan, people.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And yeah, thank you for the happy Ramadan wishes, because I am fasting right now. I'm actually I've been very sleepy today because of the early waking up, right? And then fasting the whole day. So yeah. But I was very looking forward for this. So it keeps me on my first day of Ramadan or fasting. So yeah, thank you very much, both of you. Thank you very much for everyone who's listening. And I will end the recording now. And